Hey everyone, so welcome to my channel where I share useful sound design and music production information. In this video, I'm going to be talking about sampling the right way and how sampling is not inherently good or bad, cheating or original, but rather a form of creative expression. So sampling is the art of taking a piece of existing audio, such as a song, a speech, a sound effect, or anything else, and using it as source material to create something completely new. Sampling has been around for decades. It's been used in almost every genre, ranging from hip-hop, EDM, and everything in between. So sampling can be a great way to add variety, texture, and inspiration to your music. However, sampling also comes with some challenges and controversies, so people may think that sampling is lazy or unoriginal, that it's stealing someone's work, or that it's just too easy. And these are all valid opinions, but they're not the whole truth. Sampling is not a black and white topic, but rather a tool that's there to allow artists to achieve innovative and original sounds. For artists who choose not to use it to its greatest potential, whether that's mindlessly throwing together a sample pack or trying to be better than everyone and not utilizing sampling at all, that used to be me for a while, and it definitely showed. The way I see it, sampling is like cooking. You can take some ingredients from different sources, and depending on how you prepare them, combine them, and season them, you can create a dish that is either bland or delicious, simple or complex, familiar or unique. And the same goes for sampling. You can take some audio from different sources, and depending on how you process them, layer them, and arrange them, you can create a track that is either boring or exciting, generic or original. So how do you sample the right way? Well, there is no definitive answer to that question, but I do have some general guidelines that I follow whenever I sample. These are not rules, but rather just suggestions that can help you sample more creatively and effectively. So firstly, and this is the most important step, is to choose your samples wisely. The first step of sampling is finding the right samples for your project, and you can use any source of audio that you want. You just have to make sure that it fits your vision and your genre. For example, if you're making a lo-fi hip-hop beat, you might want to look for like some old jazz recordings or clips from like vintage movies. And if you're making a techno track, you might want to look for some industrial sounds. And you can also use your own recordings or sounds that you've synthesized yourself. The key is to find samples that inspire you and that have some potential for manipulation. Okay, so I've chosen this sample, which is a sample that I've made, and I'm going to be using this sample for further manipulation. So secondly, is to transform your samples. So the second step of sampling is processing your samples to make them sound different from the original. And this is really where the fun begins. You can use an infinite amount of effects and techniques to alter the pitch, tempo, timbre, dynamics, and texture of your samples. For example, you can use an EQ to filter out unwanted frequencies or boost certain ones. You can use compression to make your samples louder or more consistent. You can use reverb to add some space or depth to your samples. You can use distortion to add some grit or warmth to your samples. You can use modulation to add some movement or variation to your samples. You can use slicing to chop up your samples into smaller pieces and rearrange them. You can use granular synthesis to break down your samples into tiny grains and create new sounds from them. And the list goes on, but you get the point. Okay, so you can see that now I've chopped up that sample and I've also pitched it up 300 cents. So with just those two things done, you can hear how much different the sample sounds. And you can hear how, like, with just chopping that up, I've completely changed the mood and the vibe of that sample. So if I wanted to, I could go and put this on a mixer track, and then I could further put some more effects on it. So one effect I could already think of putting on is something like a reverb. So I'll go and put my favorite reverb on it and choose a preset that I feel like will fit this. I'm gonna go and decrease the decay on that because that's pretty long, but that gives it a really spacious kind of feel. For this particular sample, I don't think that there's really much more processing I need to do on it. Thirdly is to layer your samples. So the third step of sampling is combining your samples with other sounds to create a fuller and richer sound. So this is where it gets really cool. You can layer different samples together to create new instruments or percussion sounds. For example, if you were layering a piano sample with a guitar sample, you could create a hybrid keyboard sound. You could layer a kick drum with a bass sample to create a really punchy sub-bass sound. You can layer a vocal sample with a synth sample to create a vocal pad. You could also layer your own samples with other elements of your track, such as the drums, the basses, the synths, or the pads, and anything else to create harmony and contrast. So now that I've rendered up that sample, I want to add a kind of punchy like, sub-bass sound to complement this sample. So I'm going to be using a kick drum and a bass sound. So I'll just use a default kick from FL Studio. So I'm going to go ahead and use this, and then for a bass, I could just go ahead and make some kind of bass sound real quick. Okay, so now that I have both a synth kind of bass and a kick drum, I can layer both of those and create my own sound. And I want to go and decrease the tail of that synth bass so it sounds a lot more like punchy. And then maybe decrease the decay of the kick drum so I can hear more of the bass. And then something I'm going to go and do is put both of these on separate mixer tracks. And I'm going to go ahead and sidechain the kick and the bass so the kick is more prominent. And this is just my method of doing that. Using the peak controller. I know it seems like the way that I'm doing it is pretty particular. This is just the way that I feel most comfortable and have most control. But you can do it however you want. I'm just going to cut off some frequencies of that kick sample. Yeah. So now that I have the sound that I want, I can go ahead and just render that out as an audio clip. Now I have that as a sample. I can further make it into an actual instrument that's playable just by dragging it back into the channel rack. I'll go ahead and create a new pattern. So I have this new kind of punchy bass sound. And I'll go ahead and want to increase the hold. Okay, so now I have a pretty good kick drum sound, and I can go and just make a pattern that goes along with my new sample. So I can just kind of listen for what the bass line is and use that. So I went ahead and sidechained this new bass sound to the original sample so that the bass is more prominent, and you can already hear how much of a difference this makes. So the fourth and final step is to arrange those samples. The final step of sampling is placing your samples in the context of your track and making them fit within the rest of your music. This is where the skill really comes in. You need to consider the rhythm, the melody, the harmony, the structure, and the mood of a track when arranging your samples. For example, you need to make sure that your samples are in sync with the tempo and the groove of your track. You need to make sure that your samples are in tune with the key and scale of your track. You need to make sure that your samples are balanced with the volume and panning of your track. And then you also need to make sure that your samples are varied and interesting throughout the duration of the track. Because if you just hear the same thing playing over and over and over, yeah, it's definitely something to avoid. So with these samples made, I'm not going to make a full track out of this, but I'll show you a lot of very useful tips that I would use if I were to be doing so. So very most important kind of thing to check for is if like I were to be using these in a new project or whatever, are they matched with my tempo? And if I was already aware that this sample, let's say I just knew that it was at 100 BPM. So I knew it was 100 BPM, but then let's say my project was 130, for example. Now this sample isn't lined up. What I'd want to end up doing is, there's multiple different things I could do. Making sure that the stretched audio is on. Just drag it to as close as I can. Drag it here. And then just make sure that it's pitched correctly. And then so that's a pretty effective way to do it, but one thing I really like about FL Studio is their feature of basically doing this automatically, and you right click on the audio and fit to tempo, and then it can try and estimate it. It doesn't always do the best, so if you already do know the tempo, you could just do that and type in 100, and it'll automatically just align it. So now it's in line. And now, when it comes to making sure it's in the right key, this is more so really something that you just have to do by ear. I mean, you can use tuners, but usually I just find it easiest just to kind of listen by ear and just like use trial and error. Something sounds a little bit off there, so maybe I want to just try and match the pitch as best as I can. So yeah, those are the two most important things you have to look for is if it's in time and if it's in key with your track. Then everything else is really up to like your own creative vision of like what kind of mood you want, what kind of feel you want your track to convey. And that's all stuff that is really up to your own like creativity and your own decision making. I've been able to stray in so much different of a direction from these original samples, and because of that, I've been able to create such an effective track. So that's really how I sample creatively. I hope this video was helpful and informative to you. And if you enjoyed it, please give a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.